But today, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite important that on the 21st of April, on a Tuesday, 2020, I am your host and presenter as usual on the channel Then and Now. They present a very special guest and want to talk about things that are close to your heart, but on a different level today. Because like I've been say earlier on, we want to give this guest chance for breakdown, economic terms, the state of the Sierra Leonean economy. Many other questions. Why are we so poor? What's the state of the Sierra Leonean economy? Waiting at the basis, revenue collection. On a level where probably, yeri asat yet. What I mean, because most times, economics is a little bit technical. In fact, it's technical, very technical terminology such as demand curve, the yield, the aggregate, and the rest of it. And to the layman out there, it's a bit confusing. So today we get for taken to another level. And the special guest we'll get today is none other than a policy analyst, Jesmed Foday Mami Suma. Jesmed, welcome to the program, sir.
Yes, my family, good evening to all my way to listen to me right now. I want to start by extending my sincere condolence to all we Sierra Leonean family who don't lost in the diaspora, particularly the US. We don't lost about 8 or 9 people away mid-on-year rebut. It could be more. And we don't lost a couple of Sierra Leoneans also in the UK or other parts of Europe. And this is a very depressing moment for we and the Chinese virus, they can threaten with people in our salon and the rest of Africa. So we plead, we remember the lost ones, the one that we don't lost, and also we extend with prayers to the families them back home, with families and brothers and sisters them waiting at the healthcare field. And some people they no say there are specific situations and circumstances that we make Black people in general and Africans in particular within the diaspora, they be affected by this coronavirus. And I would like to even touch on that in 1 minute, if you permit me.
Absolutely, it's the topic of the moment. So yeah, please feel free and go ahead.
Now the fact that say most people the way they work in the healthcare field are minorities. So because of that, minorities are more exposed to the virus than any other demographic. The second reason is because minorities are more likely to be the ones who ride public transportation, whereas the one that we will afford the expensive to car and getting special drivers, they're not easily exposed to much people. The third and most important reason where everybody needs to understand is the fact that we Africans will get dark pigment, dark skin. We always experience vitamin D deficiency in general. Most people don't know that. Me get the experience, me get them out of experience actually, and do through some research, because I'm out they read a lot. So through some research, I find out, say, the thing where they affect me, therefore do with vitamin D deficiency, and immediately I begin for taking the vitamin D, the problem solved immediately. And I also now don't learn, say, the vitamin D deficiency, they affect the respiratory challenges for anybody else. So since Black people are more prone to vitamin D deficiency, and they are more likely to have respiratory problem because of the vitamin D deficiency, so it makes sense for it gives reason for why mostly Black people are affected. And when you get vitamin D deficiency, you generally weak, your energy level to go down. When your energy level go down, you're not able to exercise a lot. And when you not exercise a lot, you gain weight. And when you gain weight, you're susceptible to high blood pressure and also susceptible to diabetes. And then pre-existing conditions, and where corona or the Chinese virus meet anybody, whether Black or white, you're more likely to go down. So in my research, then circumstances then they will make, I don't find out why make with people and they very much susceptible to the Chinese virus. So they pray to God, let God help we, let God protect them, let God able forgive we, we able for provide assistance for them on the way back home. Because it's very challenging for a lot of Sierra Leoneans in the diaspora. So plenty of people know they go right now because of the lockdown. So it's a very challenging moment. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks for that. It's quite an eye opener. The blind of it all imply black and brown suffer more because it's an issue of poverty. You know, we are mostly going to be on the front lines. We're going to ride public services, buses, and do, the cleaning work. So we're susceptible, to this. And the brother just enlightened we again on a more scientific related basis on vitamin D. Thank you so much, Jesmed. Jesmed, for begin with, I want to go straight to you breaking down. As I say, we did talk about the layman today, and this conversation, I don't want to call an interview, it's all yours because I want to let you break them down and take your time so that we people them deep down at the hinterland. When they get for your readers, then go understand exactly what in this thing mean. So I want to begin with asking you for broke down certain economic terminologies. And these terminologies, one will be macro and micro. Can you please break them two terminologies then for we in an economic sense, please?
When you talk about macroeconomics, you look at like when you get an aerial view of a situation. For instance, you're talking about like when you take a plane, you look over an entire country, you're able for VM based on blocks or region. So the macroeconomics talk about the aggregate data relating to the economic activities that we don't happen at the ground level. For instance, when you talk about unemployment data, when you talk about inflation figures, when you talk about the gross domestic product, the one and then aggregate data we compile from the micro activities, then economic activities then will take place, will lead to that particular data. Now, when you talk about microeconomics, we are referring to the demand, the day-to-day activities, like when we go in a shop now, I go buy. That data, data where it relates to me on economic activity, on an individual basis, on business to business basis, on government to government basis. Those are all what we consider to be the microeconomic data. These are the type of breaking down in a layman term, so I'm not going to go for use any economic jargons for confuse the listeners.
Which is exactly the point that we are trying to drive towards. Thank you very much. And before we go into the into of this particular conversation between me and you and the audience at the appeal to una can engage una self like una don't start already in the chat room, and we also encourage una for share this video. Why let it go selfish, please. Let others get involved. Mr. Jesmed, I also want kindly ask you for broke down for we, just like you've done with macro and micro, fiscal and monetary
policies. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
Now, when we talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy, now the two pillars in that one and the where they form the foundation of the entire economic policy of a government, where they define the rules, the regulations of which the government need for follow for bring about economic growth. Now, the difference is that the fiscal policy, they focus on waiting government they generate out of economic activity in terms of the revenue and how that government they spend that revenue there for running itself and run the country. Whereas monetary policies, they deal with issues that way they lead to actual economic growth, where they deal with the concept of macroeconomic data like the employment, unemployment, GDP, and so on and so forth. That them policies, then they where the central bank responsible for exclusively supposed to be responsible for looking at the entire economy and make changes them using all the necessary monetary policy tools that were available to the central bank for let it go able for generate activities within the economy. Now that make them say the controller of the central bank supposed to be independent of the central government. It's supposed to be independent of the government itself. Because waiting then they do. Now, one way it can even be in conflict with the actions the way the president or the minister of finance they do. I will give example in that area. Now, with respect to fiscal policy, then you focus now for just see how best they're able to generate revenue from the economic activities the way they take place in the country, and you're able to manage that money there so that government go able to run itself day by day.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether you can break it down more than you've broken it down already. So therefore, what I think we don't establish is the link between policies, be it fiscal, be it monetary, and the ones that we define.
The difference, we'll just specify the difference. We'll not touch even on the link yet. If you want to go into the link, I can go into the link. How then
we will definitely.
Then they're able to complement one another for bring about economic activities within the country.
Well, we definitely go into that, and that bore into the next question, which is about governance and the economy. That's why I was saying that it kind of twin together, and that also give you the opportunity, for let you expatiate, if you will, please.
Yes. Now, when we talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy, they're all supposed to work towards the same goal. The ultimate goal, now for let the economy of the country continue for generate growth. Ultimate goal, now for generate growth. But within that growth day, now in government, they say, okay, when don't they enjoy too much, when I pay small tax, now the government, they get revenue. Now, so government, they're able to take money from that one and they're able for build schools, build roads and stuff like that. Now, let we see how fiscal policy and monetary policy go able to complement one another. With respect to monetary policy, governments, they control the flow of money within the economy by using certain monetary policy tools that were available to the government. And in so doing, they create opportunities then for businesses within the economy for able for invest, able for generate economic growth, create jobs for people. But sometimes the monetary policy aspect may not just be enough. You go need some help from the fiscal policy area. I can give you an example. For instance, fiscal policy.
Go ahead, please.
Now, in fiscal policy, now they're responsible for determining how much custom duties businesses they pay when they import goods and services. Now, they determine how much quota then they allocate to companies then for able to import certain things. Now, if the fiscal policies I want to help the monetary policy, for instance, that the monetary policy go say, okay, let me institute certain changes, so go drop the interest rate in the country, such that businesses then go able to get easy access to finance, for able to invest in the economy, or like able for do something where go limit the supply of money into the economy, so that I go able for control inflation. Now, some of the times, then two objectives then they can be conflicting with one another. So now that's why the Ministry for Fiscal Policy can come in. So the fiscal policy side go able to say, no, wait, not to all time for they take money from businessmen. Them. You ain't a farmer. You want to invest in agriculture. Right now, we need agriculture growth. If you bring machinery where they come into the country, you are duty free. That is fiscal policy. It is a duty free to all importers of capital goods. So people are now going to say, you know what, if I'm able to get better loan from the government, from the banks, or the interest rate too high, but this is an opportunity one will go for pay customer. Before I go bring that diamond scan, before I go bring that rest cam, why not go import the machine when are duty free, where government they give me even concessions, they give me tax concession. That is fiscal policy. So that's how fiscal policy can complement monetary policy in helping to generate economic growth within the economy. There are so many areas now that make the first step with respect to getting those two policy pillars to work complementarily and also effectively. Now, for make sure say you separate them. The government's not supposed to be able to come impose I can give you an example which the government can always create problem with respect to monetary policy goals. Now, for instance, let we go into national debt, where government need money for spend, you know, get money, you know, able to get them through taxation, you know, able to get them through a grant from donors then. The ultimate end we get for fall on, now for take debt. You get foreign debt, you get domestic debt. Now, with respect to domestic debt, the channel through which you get a domestic debt is through the central bank. Now, what they mean, the central bank will say, okay, let's sell treasury bills. You sell treasury bills to the public. When you sell treasury bills to the public, where the public take the money, then buy the government's own treasury bills, guess what? Now, loan then they give to the government. Now, that money that the central bank will take, is able for now give to the central government for let them go able for finance some of the activities that we're able for implement. Or if government short of cash completely, the central government, the central bank now get the ultimate decision for decide say let we print more money. Now, in certain situations, it is not good for the economy for let either print more money or let incur more debt. So if you get an independent central bank governor, where they see say the demand from the central government, the Minister of Finance, if we go ahead with that demand, they provide able assistance funding for the central government, it go create too much pressure on the economy, increase the inflation, affect the economy in general. The central governor, just like SL Bangura, the only governor who have been done show independence now the entire economic history as alone, with the exception of somebody else who I'm not going to name his name right now because he still live in one mix from politics. Now the only two governors, people and now we don't serve as governors. Now Salo, when we don't look through the history, we're able to show the independence from the pressures of the president in terms of able for control the economy. In a situation like that, you need a central bank governor who will say, no, this particular step here, I'm not going to begin for print more money, or I'm not going to begin for taking more debt just for finance and insatiable expenditure when they undercore. So what me go recommend, when I go back to our fiscal policy, when I look at our national budget, when I cut down on our expenditure, when I able for consolidate funds, when I able for generate revenue or mobilize revenue, when I the world way the current government like for the use, and able to judiciously spend that money there instead of when I come back I begin for the buy sell treasury, too much treasury from the commercial end, because that one they self get your own implication. They get the implication on interest rate, they get an implication on jobs, they get an implication on the value of a currency, they get an implication on the unemployment rate. So that implication, and you need a central governor way to look at the implication of that action and say no, just so that the government's not going to be able to always get away, and so that the economy will be able to be sustainable and move forward. But that saying no, that is where the challenge has always been, because then they sacrifice all them macroeconomic indicators that we don't name so far at the expense of providing more money for the government.
So let me ask this question, pertaining to the same vein where you explain to we monetary and fiscal, because they're meant for complement each other. But the bank, for example, is meant to be independent. And in most cases, it's not, with the exception of one, historically speaking, who was independent, and you call the name, which is the late SL Bangura, who met some unfortunate circumstances. And there's another one currently living and probably gets some political ambitions. So for that reason, you decide for keep him.
No, well, you actually not get political ambition, but now we're very conservative. Very conservative, and now we're very reserved, one for mixed pan, but now I get so much respect for when it comes to the issue of policies and economic policies, especially when it comes to the issue of central bank running of the Central Bank of Sierra Leone.
Okay, although you went at great length for explain the differences and somewhere the convergence as well, but some people, as I see back again, get a little bit of a confusion, because if the monetary policy now for change interest rate and influence the supply of money, whereas the fiscal now for changing the tax rates and the levels of government spending, which according to you, they influence aggregate demand on the economy. How then do these two work separately and at the same time somewhere they're supposed for there is some confusion around that. If you can break that down, please.
Okay, like the example. Now, I will give two examples in terms of the issue of taxation and the area of budget, national budget, especially on the issue of national debt. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when government want for institute certain fiscal policies we will complement the effort for generate economic growth, it will look at the taxation, whether it is essential or necessary for increased tax or reduced tax. Now, increasing tax or changing the tax ratio get an effect on the economic activities in general, where also they supplement or complement the effort of the monetary policies we're able to assist businesses for engaging in economic activities. There are areas where government will say, I will give concessions. There are areas where government will say, I will give subsidies. Now, these are all areas where they control under the fiscal policy committee or fiscal policy board, where they headed by the supposedly be headed by the Minister of Finance. Now, with respect to that, if government say, for instance, like that fuel subsidy where government lift, that not get much to do with monetary policy. That gets everything to do with fiscal policy. But that particular action, they get a very serious impact on the economic activities in general we connect with monetary policies. For instance, when you lift the subsidies on fuel, it automatically affects the cost of production of goods and services within the entire economy. And as people like we've been predict, it was not timely for the government for lifting subsidy day, where in effect, it automatically lead to inflation. It will automatically lead to the increase of prices of goods and services. Gari prices go up, pepper go up, all kinds of things go up, just because of that major mistake. That not necessarily means say people like we, they advocate for government subsidies. No, there are easy ways for lift subsidies, where you go able for ensure say there are economic activities where don't take place at a certain ratio. When you don't look at the macroeconomic data, you don't see say now people don't begin for the generate income, jobs and don't begin for the create, people in the get money inside their pocket. Then you say, okay, now let's lift subsidies because you not get extra income for spend on extra fuel.
So, so if I can interject there quickly, just to break that flow there, the idea, you sound like you oppose to government in international partners because the lifting of subsidy was based on the advice of government's international partners, i.e. the IMF, etc., etc.
Yes. Now, let's explain that side.
Okay.
One of the biggest problems we get, Africa as a whole, and Sierra Leone in particular. Now, this dependent on IMF and World Bank for not only dictate we policies them, and also impose certain stringent measures them on we, where they affect the general economic life of our people. Now, the problem, as I mentioned earlier, is also centered around national debt. It's centered around the fact that government likes to spend without controlling themselves and spending beyond what they're able to generate from the economy. Now, if you rely on World Bank and IMF, and based on history, we don't rely on them so long, for the past 30, 40, or 50 years, we don't see any meaningful difference in terms of the general outlook of the standard of living of our people. Why should we continue to listen to them? So my position would have been is this. Rawlings attempted it in Ghana, and that is what laid the foundation for growth in Ghana. And Blaise Compaoré attempted it, but the French people assassinated him. That was going to...
You mean Thomas Sankara then?
Thomas Sankara laid the foundation, but the French people assassinated him. But looking from those examples, there are ways you can actually confront IMF and World Bank and still be able to have control of your own economic policies moving forward. Now, bringing it to the issue of Sierra Leone in particular, what the entire concept of the agreement, the nature of the agreement, the context of the agreement between the IMF and World Bank with Sierra Leone is that they want to see that the Sierra Leone government is able for sure say then get the ability for pay back the loan where they don't take from the IMF. Now, all we need for them show to them is to show that we have the ability to pay the loan. Let them don't dictate to us how we go about that. Now, because IMF and World Bank know exactly waiting the need for tell government for continue for make sure say then get a leash on our economic neck. Now that make them they impose on we, because if IMF and World Bank want for really get the government for take the necessary policies that we go make the government able for pay on their loans and then the need for do things that we go make government not even get need for go take the loans. I will give you two examples. One, current government they spend over 55% of our national budget, 55% of the income where the government they generate, where government they collect on wages and salaries. That is the biggest chunk on our national budget. Now, if we add that one day to the servicing of existing debts, where like an Kroma take over the past 10 years, they are spending over $200 million every year for service existing debt. Now, that one day plus the wages and salaries, it's constituting almost 60 to 70%, or some could even say 80% of government budget. They go towards servicing of debt and also the servicing of wages and salaries. So if those two are the biggest chunks within our budget, if you want for sure say you're able to pay IMF, not to that side, if you go look, say, that side they will spend too much. Government not for they in the business of running business. Government not for be the only employer in an economy. It will never grow. So what do? Let's go back to our budget and look at all the salaries and wages. All them people they pay $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 equivalent. All the embassies they will get around the world. Each of the ambassadors and their deputies are making almost an average of $7,000 a month. Imagine if you have 15 to 20 embassies. Calculate that. $7,000 every month per one ambassador. Multiply that by 20. That is almost $140,000.
And that could pay the salary for over 150 teachers alone.
Now, imagine that if government say that is too much money for us to spend every month. This is our budget. Let's stop taking loans from IMF. Let's don't lift subsidies so soon. Let us cut down on our embassy staff. I'm not saying we shouldn't have embassies everywhere. Let's reduce the number of embassies. Let's reduce our embassy staff. Let's don't use the embassies as an employment channel for our party pundits. Let us reduce our expenditure just so that we can save enough to pay IMF, pay World Bank, so that we will take a gradual step to lift subsidies when the time is conducive enough for us to do so. Now let's look at the agencies that were created by the previous government. There are certain parastatals in government in which people are paid $6,000, $4,000, $5,000, $7,000 a month. These were created exclusively to pay party pundits of the previous government. And when when this government came,
excuse me, sir. We will go back to that. I know there's a correlation between the basic economics that we are talking about and the politics, but let's leave the politics for one moment. Let's come back to basic economics. Earlier on, you talk about the skyrocketing of basic prices for basic goods and services as a consequence of the rise in petroleum in energy prices. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we know say inflation rate moderated from 18.2% to 16.8% at the quote a World Bank.
Yeah, 16.8, yes.
Yeah. And that was in 2018, but increased to 17.2% in 2019. And this reflects a sharp depreciation, according to World Bank, of an exchange rate that elevated non-food prices, which was due mainly to the increase in fuel prices. I basically repeat what you articulate earlier on, but I want to ask you this wider question. Is there no fortitude, no foresight, no policy analyst within government circles that at least, they talk about sober civil servants them, we're able to foresee this kind of thing and argue and defend, say, no, we are not going this way. This is the policy initiative that we're going to take because Plan A is better than Plan B. Instead, they adopt Plan B, where they know, say, it will cause more economic havoc on the people. Why do you think this is such a situation?
Well, it's because of several factors. Factor number one, our governments in Africa in general and Sierra Leone in particular are always dealing with economies that are economies that are slavishly tied down to the IMF World Bank ideology. And the reason being because these governments still depend on IMF and World Bank. The second reason is because of the usual tribal, political, and regional interests that override public policy. So even if they know that this is the right thing to do, but because it requires sacrifice, sacrifice on the part of the government, such that they will not be able to hire all their pundits that have been sing praising them to election, that campaign for them to election, such that they'll have to sacrifice, that they don't have to just hire people from their tribe or from their region or for this and that. They will now have to create a balance and look at that Limbaman or Timiniman or Sosoman that has the brain to do the work. They bring it in irrespective of which party they belong to. Those are the sacrifices they don't want to make until we have a leadership that overlooks interest, political interest, overlooks tribal and regional interest, overlooks slavishly. We need economies that have the Pan-Africanist mindset, because the tools of economics is like the mechanic tools that a mechanic uses to fix a vehicle. Those tools are not usually one cap fit all. You will not say you will apply the same economic policy that you applied in Bangladesh because Bangladesh is as poor as Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
The nature of the economy, the intrinsic nature of the economy, influenced also by cultural experiences and other factors, then different from Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
So then tools and the way you get, the economic tools and the way you get, you need for tailor them to the realities of your own economy. You're not going to say because, a World Bank say you for give out, if for, like give this example. This is a very classical one.
Please do.
Take more loans and adopt certain monetary policies, the way they flood the economy with money, just so that businesses go get access to money, just because that the same policies they don't do in other different countries.
Yeah.
And for do that, you forget to say in our own economy, it is not manufacturing base. It is mainly import base.
Yeah.
So when you change interest rate, when you sell or buy treasury bills, treasury notes, or treasury bonds, depending upon the length of period, it gets an effect on the supply of money within the economy.
Yep.
The people that will go be more attracted for letting them go take their loan than they from the bank because the interest rate don't go down. If the majority of them are people that way they import goods and services, that is not going to help your economy. And it has never helped our economy. Because what he will do, they will take 10 billion leones from the economy, use that 10 billion leones to go buy dollars, which will put pressure on our foreign reserve, and then import goods and services. Many of those are not manufacturing anything, creating very few jobs. So in a situation like that, you need to tailor the economic policy tools to target people that want to invest in specific areas by creating a specific set of volume of money for anybody investing in small, medium scale manufacturing. Because if you have an interest rate, as you rightly mentioned, 16%, I think it's gone down below 16%. It should be around 15% now. They've done a good job from 18 to 15% right now, 15 point something percent, which is good, but it's still terrible compared to other parts of the world where the interest rate is 6%, 3%, 2%, and so on and so forth. But imagine if the interest rate is 15% and the bank lending rate is like 3 or 4%, for instance, the bank that is giving out the loan also have to think about default rate, the default ratio, the default risk, and other things that the bank also have to generate revenue from. So if you add the inflation rate, 15%, you add the bank rate that they get from overnight lending, which is also an influence to that interest rate, added to it, let's say 3%, that goes to 18% or 19%. Then you think about the default risk that the bank have to worry about. Maybe they add another 5% for their own profit, because they don't go into business just for giving out, changing money from one position to the other. They need to have whatever. That increases the interest rate to 20 to 20 something percent. Now you tell me, how will you be able to take a loan that is pegged down to 20 something percent and expect to invest and generate money and pay back that particular loan? So the incentive to invest that money into manufacturing that will take 1 to 2 years before you even begin to generate revenue from it, it's killed by using that method. So in a situation like that, you need to make certain volume of money created for certain sectors of the economy and define specific interest rates for those loans that are given out to such businesses. And most importantly, even underwrite the inflation impact on those loans that are given out by giving certain concessions. Say after 2-3 years, then the actual interest rate kicks in. If you are going to go into agriculture, if you are going to go into oil manufacturing so that you manufacture coconut oil out of coconut, or palm oil out of palm kernel, or if you are going to poultry, or if you are going to animal husbandry business, or you are going to some building furniture instead of exporting our timber. If that's the kind of businesses you are going to, we have this 100 billion leons available. At this interest rate, government is going to underwrite some of the whatever. So you have to tailor your policies to the realities of your own economy. You don't listen to the bank and IMF.
I think you make an absolutely brilliant point. Absolutely, it's not one solution fits all.
Exactly, it's not one cap fits
all.
No,
it's not, and we continue to make those kind of mistakes, and for some reason we keep embracing the wrong solution over and over, 50, 60 years after independence. But I want to ask you this, Mr. Jesmed, if you don't mind. Looking at the statistics again with regard to World Bank and the IMF, specifically World Bank, the data in terms of poverty for countries regarding the country in question now, or the country where they talk about, is kind of gloomy. It points out, that everything about the country is poor. So the question I want to ask is, what does the World Bank use for classify or categorize countries as poor? Which are the indicators, and why is Sierra Leone classified as a poor country?
Well, in generally, poverty in terms of the individual household and family basis is described as the inability of an individual, a family, or a household to be able to afford or have access to the basic necessities of life. Now, poverty can be absolute, which is general in any part of the world, or it can be relative. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that poverty, when somebody, an individual, a family, or a household, not able to afford the basic necessities of life, what is called the biological needs of life, such as food, 3 square meal, such as shelter, and basic things that where they affect healthcare, where they affect your life. If you're not able to afford that, you are considered to be absolutely poor. And in absolute poverty, that one is applicable to anybody in any part of the world. It can be America, it can be Germany, it can be China, whatever. If you don't have a category you're able to afford, then you are considered absolutely poor.
What can lead to this on a national basis in terms of economy and government and governance? Why will some people, fall below the poverty level? Speak to us economics, economically. Why people fall into that category? We make World Bank, they classify, such indicators as ones related to poverty.
Yes, I come to that one day. You get what you call poverty line, poverty. Monetary consumption-based poverty. You get what you call the multidimensional poverty index. I won't come to all that one day, but I want to take and gradually before I come to that one day. Then I will come to the gross domestic products, GDP, which is what they use to determine countries and the per capita income of individuals within that particular country. Then are the macroeconomic side of it. Now, on the individual basis, when you talk about relative poverty, to continue with the same trend, is that when they say poverty in relative terms, now poverty in relation to the neighbors, the neighborhood, in terms of what then they consider poor in New York, for instance, no go be poverty in relative terms in a place like Sierra Leone. For instance, in New York, somebody go there, now one small apartment, you be able to afford accommodation, one apartment, you get in one used car, you get in, sometimes they make $2,000-3,000 a year, a month as income, and they still consider you poor. Because in relative to the entire economic scale in New York, you are poor. But if you take that same person, they can't go to a salon, hey, it's more than middle income. You see, so relative terms and absolute terms, there are two categories of poverty. Absolutely. Now we come to the issue of measurement of poverty. Now, then get the global poverty line, where they don't define, say, anybody we know they make up to $1.90-something, which is more or less the current rate now, let's say roughly a little less than $2. If you're not making that per day, then you are considered to be extremely poor. Now, in terms of using monetary consumption-based metrics, plenty economists and don't argue, say, that particular rate today is too small. And World Bank self don't agree with that argument today. So World Bank come up with a new ratio, $3.20 per day for low-income countries. And I will explain why they consider us low-income or developing countries. Then you also have $5.50 for middle-income countries like South Korea. Now, with $3.20 per day, if we take that one day into the Sierra Leone context, that's an average of 32,000 leones a day. So which means anybody in Sierra Leone, we're not able to make up to 32,000 leones a day, which is almost 960,000 leones a month, or almost 960-something thousand leones a month. It means you are extremely poor. You fall within the poverty line. But again, economists also argue, say, consumption monetary-based metrics for determining poverty of individuals and households it does not have any discernible meaning to the true nature and extent of poverty, because it takes out the non-monetary component of measuring poverty. So now then come up with this metrics in 2010, then call it the multidimensional poverty index, created by an institution called the Oxford Poverty Human Development Initiative, together with UNDP. So then create this MPI. Under MPI, then they take both monetary and non-monetary categories into consideration. It's divided into 3 major categories. You get healthcare, you get education, you get standard of living. Well, with respect to standard of living, that one there is subdivided into another 6, where include housing, food, drinking water, and other different metrics that we use. So they're able to capture that one day. So it not necessarily means if you're not able to make the $3.50 a day, if you're able to get access to drinking water, you're able to get access to sight for sleep, you're able to get access to some of them here. If they get a government who don't invest in the area, then people then go able to get access, then standard of living go able to be increased, even though monetarily then poor. Now, percentage-wise, for Canada to the classification of the country, if a larger percentage of you people, they are classified as multidimensionally poor, like in the case of Sierra Leone, the recent statistics says 64.8% of Sierra Leoneans.
How do they arrive? How do they arrive at the percentage?
Well, they get statisticians them, where they compile the data in terms of how many people within the population they get access to education. So then they look at the education numbers. Then they get access to healthcare. Then they get access to able for feed themselves. So now then data then they compile, they're able for break and down to such that they're able to come with a specific aggregate number where they go use as the metrics for define whether certain number of people just like how then they're able for tell say the literacy rate in Salone is about 35 to 40%. Over 60% of the Sierra Leoneans then they're illiterate. Now some they're able for compile some of them data and they for come up with the aggregate number. Now, with respect to Sierra Leone, as I said, over 64.8% of Sierra Leoneans they are considered to be multidimensionally poor, meaning that they're able to afford all the tier 1 mentioned. So because of that, Sierra Leone is classified as a poor country and a developing country. Developing because they want for polish and small say would they grow, would they give the hopeful part of the description. But most importantly, they can also look at the gross domestic product. The gross domestic product, now the entire the monetary value of all the goods and services that they produce in every given year, now the country. Salone, we own gross domestic product is within the range of 3.8 billion to 4.5 billion. It will not reach up to 5 billion under analyst Kroma, but because of the economic hiccups that we don't get over the past years, and of course the poor management of the economy, we don't go back down to 4.4 billion or 3.8 billion.
I get stats for you on that, by the way. So what we know is that the external reserve increased slightly to $500 million, which is the equivalent of 3 to 4 months worth of imports. But
it's not even up to 4 months worth of import.
Well, listeners stats are the read from the World Bank, so you could say that, but it's directly from the World Bank and are the directly.
I think it's 3 months. It's 3 months.
Yeah, but
our average monthly foreign currency usage is about 150 to 180,000 million dollars.
So this is what the stats say anyway, because myself believes that under analyst Kroma, like you mentioned, it was $500 million and but it dropped under analyst Kroma. That's 2018 and beyond, 483 million, and that increased in 2019 slightly to 500 million. So 500 million is 3 to 4 months worth of import, whereas the 483 million is worth about 3 months or 3 months and a few weeks worth of import. Yeah, you can go ahead. I mean, just want to give you that data there from World Bank.
Yeah,
because that's exactly what you're speaking to right now.
Yes, well, that a very good ratio for taking into consideration, because when foreign creditors one for weigh the country in ability for payback in debt. Now, some of them things they look at them foreign reserve. They look at how much reserve they get they're able for service the needs within the next 3 to 4 months. The average is 3 months. If you're able for service, you demand for foreign currency up to 3 months. If possible, beyond that, then get some little confidence, say push camp and shop, then they're able to get hope says until you're able to pay you money. Yeah. But the moment that ratio they begin go down, then they begin worry. And then they shoot up the interest rate when they charge for whatever loan when they offer you. And since this
I'm following. I'm just following. I said,
So in a situation like that, what is it that we need to do differently for let we inject life in our economy? There are certain things we need to be clear about. The intrinsic nature of our economy is not necessarily the same as every other economy around the world, irrespective of whether we share similar economic data. So when we want to formulate policies, we need to take certain realities into consideration and be able to bring about policies that speaks to those realities. Our biggest problem, and I want every Sierra Leonean take this into consideration. Now the fact that say, we as a government, they spend far more than waiting will they generate out of the economy. And because of that, we always, they tie ourselves down where they make, say we're not able for influence the economic indicators them in the positive direction. And the reason why that is important is because we own debts the way they take, especially the foreign debt. Now debts the way we get for pay in currencies we not to leones. So if we get for service then debts then they, we also need for be mindful of the fact say we need for produce things that will they sell to the rest of the world for get access to that foreign currency. So I don't hear some people and they make arguments say, well, after us, America get more debt per salon in terms of percentage wise. In other words, the debt to GDP ratio, we can always take into consideration. Or Japan gets more debt per salon in terms of debt to GDP ratio. But there's a big difference. The big difference is that the American debt is paid in American US dollars. So whether they sell outside to the rest of the world or not, they have control of the dollars. If push comes to shove, investors or creditors know say, push comes to shove, America can choose for print more dollars and pay. Even though that's not the case, they may not necessarily do that. And secondly, they always know say the American economy is always strong, irrespective of how much debt they get. They're always able for, regenerate, fire back life into the economy moving forward. That is not the case with Sierra Leone. With respect to Japan, most of them debt now domestic debt, and the Japanese businesses, individuals within Japan, and they lent them government. Well, push camp and shop, then they give, then they buy Japanese treasury bonds. So Japan therefore pay that. Not to now yen get for use for paying people them back. You understand? So the pressure we then get is completely different from the pressure we get for find a way for export for get access to the dollars. That brings me to the in need for now begin for consider. This is very radical opinion why they can raise right now. It is now need for us to begin to consider to hold some of our reserves in gold and if possible diamond, but in this case gold. Because why? As long we get access to the gold, what would they mine our country? Just like the Americans have access to their dollars, when they print when they want for pay debt.
So why do you think this position is radical? Why? I don't understand because you wouldn't.
Yes, well, some people might think it's radical because it does not fall within the World Bank and IMF prescription in terms of how to handle and strengthen your own economy. So most of the sickness we get are the fact that say some of the economists the way they use for letting go able for influence with policies and can't think outside the box. They always want to follow the footsteps of World Bank and IMF. If the Sierra Leone government say for now every gold mine in Sierra Leone will be bought by the government. And irrespective of who will mine them, where Branca, will not they ask you whether you get license or not. Your Branca, will they buy them? Will they keep 20 or 50% of a reserve in gold? Push camp and shop as the gold price rise up. Now we reserve the rise up, so you know they should not idle. You understand? Eh? So it's more or less an investment of our reserve. You understand? That even go create more confidence to creditors. Then say so push camp and shop. Then go, it's almost $1 billion gold then get, we then get reserve. So those are some of the radical positions.
But you could say people like Gaddafi being get and then bomb them into smithereens.
That's why I said it's radical.
Yeah, so
why I said it's radical.
We hardly stand any chance. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is quite an interesting conversation we are having here with none other than policy analyst Jesmed Foday Mami Suma. And we will try for breakdown into bits and pieces, economic jargons, where as usual you get all the technical jargons in there, and I can see the chat room is really heating up. Somebody say we can use tourism. We can use tourism, for generate generate foreign currency, of course. But look at the tourism industry now. So, like I say again, today the 21st on a Tuesday of April 2020.
Go ahead.
Jesmed Suma is on the platform right now. But you want to say something before I ask you the next question? Please go ahead.
Now, this time we talk about having access to foreign currency. The problem where we get the politics of our country, it influence every aspect of society, the economic, social, and even political life of our people, to such an extent that when the government comes to power, then they see recommendations provided by people, salient recommendations, where they're able to turn over the economy and revamp the situation moving forward. But because those recommendations are coming from people that are not affiliated to their party, they ignore them. I can give you an example. We have been focusing so much on foreign direct investment, but the government have not taken any formal approach to explore diaspora direct investment. Me get access to data, and I don't put together certain concepts where you're able to make, if the government is able to pay some attention to the accessible diaspora capital that we have. Plenty of us will want to go invest back home as our retirement income, to go invest back home in ventures in Sierra Leone, such that when we get to retire, we don't have to worry, we go back home and relax and get the benefit of that investment. But we are faced with so many challenges, and I will give you examples to some of those challenges. One, if I want to invest in Sierra Leone right now, I will either have to have the $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 capital to go invest that will give me reason to leave my job and go sit in Sierra Leone to run such an investment. Very few of us can afford $150,000 to $200,000 a chunk and go invest. So the next option is either you rely on relatives and friends and other people on the ground to handle investment for you. And we've all had bad experiences through that. So many Sierra Leoneans have lost so much money trying to invest back home, relying on people on the ground, because they see us as somewhere to leak money. They don't have no vision to see that, say, hey, if I handle this, my family and business, we all grow. Now we all grow together. If you get Mr. Gas and Sawe name. So what happens? It discourages us to invest in Sierra Leone. The third option is for us to use investment vehicles. Unfortunately, we don't have investment vehicles to invest money in. For instance, I am with some folks are working on creating what I call the Sierra Investment Fund. Under this Sierra Investment Fund, we are planning to float $10 million shares sold at $1 per share, such that if you have your $1,000, 2,000 pounds or 3,000 pounds, you don't need to leave UK or leave America, go to Sierra Leone to go sit and find a way to do any petty trading. All you do, you buy shares into that Sierra Investment Fund. That fund managers will now look at that money and buy shares in specific banks in the financial sector, or it creates certain businesses and run those businesses. This brings two things into play. The diaspora capital flow into Sierra Leone and the intellectual capacity of the diaspora follow it, because this time, that person that has the knowledge to run a microfinance, has the knowledge to run a bank, has the knowledge to run a manufacturing plant, but may not have the $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 necessary to create that plant, will now have this Sierra Investment Fund to buy shares in, and Sierra Investment Fund will create the plan, and then he can now go and run and use his talent to bring back to bear in the development of the economy of Sierra Leone.
So two quick questions on that before I move on to my next question.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, the enabling, something need for precede all of what you've just.
Thank you. That's what I was going to touch about, the enabling environment.
Yeah. Okay, and that enabling environment is not there. So we need to speak about that enabling environment in the first place, because all what you've spoken about.
In terms of policies, in terms of bank regulations and policies.
Absolutely, security. The institutions, empowering them, independent jurisdictions, you know, within the governance system.
By my own prediction, by my own assessment, if we're able to kick down the off, we'll bring in worst case scenario, we'll bring in between $5 to $10 million in the first year, maybe $15 million every year pouring into Sierra Leone from that diaspora investment that goes into the country.
Good. If you can answer this question in 30 seconds, how can we hold gold? This is now somebody from the chat room asking, how can we hold gold where we not get any other income in the country?
How can we hold gold where we not get any other income?
I believe you did.
How not get other income in the country? That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so we will move on. Probably expand on very much. You know, earlier on
I think what they try to say is that why we forgo hold we gold as reserve, where we not get where we need for sell the gold for bring money come into the country. I'm sure that's what he's trying to say. Well, if that's what he's trying to say, let him realize that the gold that we have, the diamond that we have, the iron ore that we have, the bauxite that we have, those are not sold by the government. Those are sold by those who invest in extracting those minerals. The government only get money out of it through the form of taxation.
Okay, we will come to that. I want move on. I want catch up with time. Okay.
Okay.
So we be supposed to talk about debt, and we talk about Lily Beach, where we talk about the economy and the rest of it, and we'll talk about national debt. You know, say very well that debt's there on the increase. Yes. Because of the prevailing circumstances. And at that exactly, I want to let you touch on, because according to the records, total public debt is going to increase from 60.9% of GDP, that was in 2018, it's already increasing widely, because now we talk about almost 63% of GDP.
63% of GDP. So it's about 70 to 80% of GDP right now.
That means it's run while in between mid-2019 and April as we talk. So which is not impossible, because it's just been escalating. Will you address that? Why is it?
Again, as I slightly touched on them earlier, it's all centered around the national budget. When they present the national budget for ratification at the House of Parliament, unfortunately, with parliamentarians, they're always the rubber stamp. They know they scrutinize the budget. Now, there is a difference between claiming that I am throwing so much million on education, on healthcare, on other on security, but if the result does not reflect the amount of money that is thrown at it, then Parliament get reason for scrutinize. Then numbers, then they for no side the numbers, and they go. If they say we throw so much millions to the House of Parliament, or so much billions of loans to certain sector of the economy, then we need to know if the results not reflect. But if majority of the budget, they focus on consumption, expenditure, and very little to do with capital expenditure, and also much to do with the servicing of debt, then parliamentarians get the moral obligation for challenge the national debt, I say the national budget, just so that we go reduce what they call budget deficit. Budget deficit now where government, they plan for spend more than what they generate. And the percentage under this current government don't increase over the past 2 years.
So let me ask you this, Jesmed, if I can pause you right there, because you seem for the in tandem with me. Next question, or you almost a preempter, which is, it gets something to do with how government, they raise revenue and how we spend revenue. You don't touch on this a little bit, but I want to let you really expand on the raising of revenue and the spending of revenue and the mismatch, because that's what you deal with just now. The mismatch, you spend waiting you not get, and as a consequence of that, you get a heavy burden on the country and the trickle down, and then suffering and poverty and the rest of it.
Thank you. Now, in terms of revenue generation, if we look at our national budget, I know say plenty people they think say because we got gold, diamond, bauxite, iron, all the mineral resources they are, now they are the biggest source of revenue. It's a lie. That is not the biggest source of our revenue. Pathetically, that ought to be part of the biggest source of our revenue. Unfortunately, it's not. The biggest source of our revenue is income tax. Now, the only way government will be able to increase revenue in that regard is to broaden the tax base. Now, broadening the tax base means increasing employment. But to increase employment, businesses have to create, investors have to create businesses. You understand? But if government turn out to be the biggest employer in the economy, that now for rob Peter for pay Paul. Because the same, if you take like a 2 million loans, you give that prison officer in salary. Then you take 200,000 loans from now on, they say a tax. They go knock chest say, I don't raise tax revenue. That is 1.8 million loans short for the next month. Because the next month you have to pay another 2 million loans. So you're taking from your own money that you're paying. So that particular aspect, in my own point of view, is not even revenue on the part of my own point of view in terms of government, as long as you don't rely on public employment as the major source of revenue for taxation, you always continue for the deficit because you will never be able. The only way government will be able to expand in tax base now for create private sector employment. For create private sector employment, both monetary policy and fiscal policy therefore complement one another. For instance, if government, they say, oh, custom duties, you increase custom duties. I don't care how much that particular investors, they don't get access to loan. Now the bank when through the monetary policy, because the fiscal policy, they levy so much tax on them like custom, it discourage that investor from invest. Now, if government, they give subsidy to rice importers, it not going to give incentive to anybody for investing in the rice production. You see the logic? And right now, with governments, them successive government and this current government, they spend between $150 to $200 million on imported rice for institutional feeding, for the police, the army, the prison officers. Ebo, that $150 million, if you take 50 million every year, you focus on directly, every year, it cut down by 50 million. It's that they focus on directly in the production of rice. So that institutional feeding, what would they take? Instead of we buy Chinese rice and send all that money go to China, we they send that money there to we farmers them.
Yeah, but the government, the government, to be honest to them, they get a viable policy, and I've seen the how you call them, the manifesto regarding the agriculture policy, and you can see that they know they make efforts in terms of the Bondapi and the other rice projects them where they know the whole. We know say within the meantime, because this is not a short-term project, but there is a political will of some sort, if you will like, because you can see the president they demonstrate that, and when you read the policy statement on the agriculture project, you can see they articulate all what you try for talk about and create another avenue for employment, because all of the resources for use for harness the agricultural project. Now local people and then go handle and such as blacksmith for fixed cutlass and the rest of it, now creating a work. Are you saying these are just mere words and not actions?
Thank you. And they are exactly mere words and not action. There's a difference between a policy in black and white, in theoretical terms, and the implementation of that policy. Now, the policy may sound good in black and white, but if the results, the outcome, not reflect what's in the black and white, that means there are other influences, factors that have influenced the implementation of that policy. I can give you some examples. For instance, if government say, we want for promote agriculture, then still they follow the same pattern where they follow from the 1970s to now, where it be say, if they bring tractor then come, where in my own position, not to government responsible for bring tractors, I will explain that also. Or then bring fertilizer come, in my own position, not to government supposed for responsible for bring fertilizer come, or they bring other agricultural implements, then decide now for say, the one give this agricultural implement for the production of rice. Now, the decision making can now for do that. Instead of then look for farmers that were on there into the farming industry for years, we get the experience, we get access to the land, then begin for look at political party supporters. And when you don't give tractors to somebody because you support you in a party, now you don't pay, don't take so. That tractor day, you go hold on as in you. Whether the tractor work, you know, work, now you don't pay that one day now. So the incentive, as long as they take out the economic incentive in the production of goods and services, and replace it with political incentive, we will never get anywhere. So if you ask me, what will I do differently in the development of the agricultural sector in Sierra Leone? These are the steps I will take. Okay. One, I will make sure that I provide specific volume of loan facilities for Sierra Leoneans, because I'm a Pan-Africanist. Sierra Leoneans, not foreigners. Foreigners have access to their own capital. They can bring their own money. But when it talks to money provided through our banking sector, through government monetary policy in Sierra Leone, I would rather focus on Sierra Leoneans, encourage them to have access to those funds. And what will I do? I will make sure that all the arable land, like Bunt get the best, sweetest arable land for the growth of barley land for the growing of rice. Salmon Chiefdom, now another area, Mambolo, now another area, we get sweet land for grow rice. If you tell farmers that inside and day, you say, are they buy when arrest them, are they give a contract 1 year in advance for produce, almost bag able for produce 10,000 bags. This one, 20,000 bags, 50,000 bags. Would they sign the contract? 50 billion leones, 20 billion leones, 10 billion leones. Sign them contract and they say, Una get this contract, Una produce that quantity of rice, automatically government they buy them for supply the army and the police. Guess what will happen? This contract here, they say 25% of them will they give you in the form of agricultural equipment. So guess what? Not of political, not of political pundits and I get for the Guinea people will actually get land for grow the rice.
Jesmed.
But let's finish this trend quick. So when you don't say, give you their equipment and they give you part of that contract and they in advance, give you technical support, give you financial support, give you administrative support for the first 2-3 years, such that every year when you grow the rice, government buy them for institutional feeding. Guess what? After year 3, that farmer don't need no direct subsistence support from the government anymore because you don't provide the foundation for that farmer there for able to continue for grow the rice. And these are not extra money where they spend out of government revenue for say increased government expenditure. No, they cut down on the money where they spend on imported rice. You direct that funding into the local producing rice so that it increase the rice production locally, and you buy the rice from the farmers directly for institutional feeding. When that happens, the rice production within the country will grow. And then you go to look into quality control and other aspects that we can make people not able to use we product them. So I give you the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you make a very brilliant point there. But now within the same vein, I'll be one point too. In other words, the World Bank and the IMF still, although of course you're not a subscriber to them, still happen, like say, they get faith in the government in agriculture policy, because when they say, for example, the World Bank say, for example, that agriculture will continue for drive the non-iron ore gross domestic product, and the GDP growth in that sector there is expected to grow 4.2%, which is massive in terms of GDP growth. Do you still have faith in that? Not on the overall basis, but just because of the prevailing times? Chinese virus, if you like?
Well, the thing is, you got to remember, say, and the World Bank, they try for paint a rosy picture in their predictions on the economies, especially if not dengue for they provide the loans, especially if not their own policy the government they follow, especially if not then they dictate the issues the way they happen. So you can always look the World Bank IMF prediction with a pinch of salt, because the policies that when they implement, not they look into the national interest or the nationalistic approach to the economic policies. Now, if, for instance, the rice production, what they talk about, so now Egyptians and from Egypt, or some Arab them from Arab country, now and they can't take over, we land, they own their land, and they own their rice, then they produce their rice, then they sometimes 80% of that they export and back. From World Bank point of view, that is a good production. From my point of view, I have questions, I have concern. I would rather have Sierra Leoneans. And this idea that Sierra Leoneans cannot do it, it is wrong.
So the idea, Jesmed, yes, that these institutions who they talk about, where they partner with government, i.e. the how you call them, the same World Bank who they talk about, the IMF, for example, the African Development Bank, the International Development Association, and the British own, DFID, Department for International Development. All of them, you say, they not really get with interest at heart. I mean, what thing they do is of their own interest, which come first, not we own interest. Is that what you say, Jesmed?
Well, I exclude DFID and the other donor. Those are donation. Those are grant donor agencies. Now, we are free to take their money or not to take their money, even though to some economists, they also distort the economy of Africa in general, where they make it difficult for government them to assume their responsibility, which is an argument I subscribe to. But this particular argument is with respect to World Bank and IMF. Now, for understand that, you need to understand the reason why they create the IMF, the reason why they create the World Bank. Unfortunately, I can't go into the details of it because time not will permit me. Now, another discussion now, and they will go for delve critically into the World Bank and IMF and their operation. The IMF was created, listen to this carefully, to help member countries them for able for finance them balance of trade deficit. Waiting a balance of trade deficit. God, this that they don't tie we down from 1944.
Okay, so what I go on for let we do, because we gradually go drift into a Pan-Africanist or Pan-African centric, if you like, sort
not
of.
Really.
Yeah, not really, but part of it, because as you develop that narrative, now so me say me bring the attune to waiting you don't say once or twice in terms of the way how you view this entire thing. And I do chime with you on some of them, but like I say, because of the purpose of time, now I get for budget, because we get many other sessions of this kind that we get for whole. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an edition. We almost run out of time and get one or two final questions for Mr. Jesmed. But this is not the last. It's been a brilliant run, I believe. And more to come, as you can see, time is never really enough. Time is so elusive that it don't begin to catch up with we so soon.
Exactly.
But yeah, there's going to be more time. There's going to be, so please share this video. I don't want to make them too boring, because then when they will get for watch later, although it's interesting, but let them go sit down and watch 2 hours of video go hard. So we want to do them like an hour, 30 minutes, and we're almost on the hour and 30 minutes mark. Okay. Yes, at the same time, I want to use the platform for extend. I want to use the platform for extend an invitation to you, because I try for set up a mouth-watering match between you and another economist, financial person, who happens to be Mr. Sankor. They see, you know, yeah, like
which Sankor?
That would be what's his first name? Alfred Sankor. I want to be a monitor in a match.
Now, Alfred Sankor in base.
Well, we will talk about this off camera later. Yeah.
Okay.
But
good.
I just talk about time. We just want to use the platform because both of you talk economics and what have you. And when you go back, when you do the follow up, you go see contribution of his. We make the match all the more tempting as the con to you, if you understand, to your position.
Yes.
Anyway, gentlemen, this is the Then and Now. I'm your host and presenter, Prince Kroma. With me tonight is a very special guest, Mr. Jesmed Foday Mami Suma. Jesmed, I believe that this will be the final question. I can always say the final question, but there can be a follow-up. As a journalist and a social activist, I always like follow-up. It never ends there. But after we don't talk about all of this, I know you did a very brilliant job. I must commend you publicly, because at the same time, while you did intimate questions, you at the same time they try for propose answers, or they inject, whether not anecdotal, but gradually you still pump them inside. And I can just imagine because of the lack of time. But finally, let me talk solution. Okay, after all of this run, this brilliant run, the final question will be, how can we fix this economy, Jesmed, in your own world, in your own perspective? How can we fix? Because it seems like say you get the answer. And I don't say if we go back, if we study for exams, we only need for go back to what you don't say, and we can arrive at the exam questions. But here it is. How can we fix this economy? It's broken. This near, like quotes the president, this broken economy, near bankrupt economy, this battered economy, how can it be fixed, sir?
Now, to fix the economy of Sierra Leone, it requires sacrifices. And sometimes the need for us to take unconventional measures. The first step is to streamlining the government structure itself, the way how we finance our government. There are specific areas in our government budget that need to be scrutinized. The first one is our wage bill. Is it right for our members of parliament to be earning an average of $70,000 to $75,000 a year? Is it right, considering our economy, for our policies to be such that former members of parliament continue to earn such a huge pension because they have served 1 or 2 terms in the House of Parliament? They're earning almost equal to their last salary that they earned when they were members of parliament, considering our economy as it is. Is it right for our deputy speaker to be earning an average of $100,000 a year, or $150,000, or a speaker $250,000 a year? Is it right for us to have individuals running parastatals that are earning $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month? Is it right for our economy when you consider the suffering of our people in the villages? So the problem solution starts from there. You look and scrutinize. Let's look at the amount of money government spends on imported rice. Let's look at the amount of money government spend on fuel. This fuel quota that they give to government officials, 1,000, 2,000 liters a month, some of which are spent on their own personal errands and not using government services. When you consider the way how poor our people are, you begin to ask yourself, is it right for us to pay somebody $5,000 a month, provide housing for them, provide vehicles for them, provide fuel for them, all of which is the burden on the same government? And where does that money come from? GST tax that our people pay, income tax that you and I pay. They increase airport tax just because they're starving of money. When you import a small vehicle into Sierra Leone, they levy custom duties just because they are starving of money. They want to feed their hunger for spending money. Is it right for our government to be spending $150,000 to $200,000 to come for UN conferences? Is it right for us to have 15, 20 embassies in which we are spending an average of $7,000 to $8,000 per person? So when you look at the entire government expenditure, you begin to streamline and create a smart and effective government. Then you begin to look at capital investment. Capital investment, because we're spending so much on consumer spending and forgetting about capital investment. Public capital investment is what lays the foundation for growth in the economy, to create the enabling environment for businesses. If I have my farm in Samun, for instance, Mapatolon, for instance, a place that has so much fertile land, I can grow my rice there. I grow thousands of rice at my own expense. But when it comes to moving my output from Mapatolon to Freetown or to the port for me to export it, there are no roads. So those are areas that we need to look into. Then the second area, or the third area, because the second one is capital investment into the economy to create the enable environment for businesses. Then you begin to look at the policies and even the judiciary, the legal system. For instance, if I want to go invest in Sierra Leone, I want to create a microfinance business. I don't want any money from government. I want to use my money. I want to go spend and create, spend and sponsor small, medium enterprises in the economy. But if I know that people will have the clout to take my 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 and abscond and run away with it, and I have no legal redress, I go to police, the police will be ripping me off. I go to lawyer will connive with the thief, they rip me off. That kills my spirit to invest. Whether I am a foreigner or a Sierra Leonean, it kills my spirit to invest. So those are areas that any sober, sensible government needs to look into. They come up with all these so-called policy gurus or economic advisors for the government, for the president here and there, paying them $10,000 a month. But we don't see the effects on their so-called policy recommendations on the lives of our people. So when you talk about policies, it all has to be centered around how is it going to transform the lives of our people on a day-to-day basis? How is it going to impact the layman from Pujaun, or that poor man from Kailaun, or that poor woman from Samun Chiefdom, or other areas in the country, Kabbalah, Moyamba, Bunk? If any policy that does not have a positive impact in their life, those areas, that policy does not fit the pen it is written with, or the paper is written on.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's always good to end on a high note, and this is the highest of the highest notes that one can end such a wonderful conversation that I've had today with none other but Mr. Jesmed Foday Mami Suma. I shall be talking to you in camera. Like I said, I'm trying to set up a mouth-watering match between you and another economist and a financial expert. And it's going to be quite interesting. I know this for sure. Indeed. And I want to say thank you for taking your time off, sir, for attending this conversation and using the opportunity to make us stand for what we really stand for at the then and now, which is to provide information for the people out there so that choices that they make will be based on informed choices.
Exactly.
Okay? So I want to say thank you so much for appearing. Ladies and gentlemen, on a good note, we know that the Leones came under intense pressure in 2019. Okay?
Yes.
And it